So my name is Mike Purchase, this is Joe Perry, and this evening we're going to cover this workshop in a couple of different sessions. I realise there are a lot of people online and a lot of people that are going to have slightly different interests and might have different levels as to where you're already at. Everything we're covering here this evening is also covered in our online support, so we're going to show you how we define that shortly. This evening we are doing two quite separate sessions. So the first session is going to be all about websites, web tools, and communication tools. So all the things that you would expect in relation to people, your community engaging with your organisation. And the second session is going to be looking at registrations, member management, database renewals, etc. Right, so in amongst all of that, I know there are a whole bunch of different interests. We've got a number of different sports codes here as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off just by sharing my screen, because this will help illustrate things for you. Probably in terms of on the website side of things, I'm just going to scroll along and just show you a couple of examples of sites that are built on the platform. All of the functionality in terms of the content management side of things is common under the hood between all of these different organizations. Now, there is a difference between what is available as on the free platform and on what we call VIP or premium sites. The exact differences are explained back through our support. I'll show you where that is as well. But we're going to try and focus really on the things that should be universally available to just about everyone. A couple of other examples in here. So underwater hockey have kind of got some good stuff going on with background video, etc. Another one with background video is Slimstone College. Right, so there's a whole raft of different sites available here. Sorry, I'll just other examples: Cornwall Cricket Club. Examples of free sites on the free platform. I believe we've got a number of rugby league people here. So here's an example of a great looking site using purely the free platform, recognisable by the fact that it's got a couple of adverts at the very bottom of the page. But otherwise, everything you see there is available on the free platform. Same with this one, Bay Olympic football, which I think is, again, not a bad example in terms of fair amount of content. And then I'm now going to I'm actually going to close out a couple of those and just jump on to our demo site used for workshop purposes. I'm going to start off by just going to the Sporty homepage. This is really the only URL that you need to remember in terms of this evening. So it's simply going to sporty.co.nz. And the things I'm going to point out to you here, there's just a couple. One is that I mentioned online support. So everything we're covering here this evening, there will be articles and video tutorials that you can reach by going to the Sporty homepage and clicking through on the online support. There are a number of sports codes that work closely with Sporty around national databases or regional databases, particularly for registrations, team entries and competition management. So for example, all of rugby nationally, most of netball, touch, football and league. Same with softball. So for you guys, there is an area in here that you can go click on, and there are some instructions that are specific for your sports code. So as we, although this evening is generic to cover all the sports codes, if you're after specific instructions relevant just for your code, where you know that your code is using either your regional competition organizer or your national body uses Sporty, please do take a look through here for your own. There are links out to your own specific support areas. The last thing I'm going to point out on this page is simply the Find Your Club or School button. I'm assuming that most people here will already probably know where their place is on Sporty, but if you don't, you should be able to find it by going through this Find Your Club or School. If you can't find a place for you on Sporty, there is the ability to add your organisation and automatically gain all of these web tools for sport and education. To save me constantly saying club, school, association, national body, whatever, I'll generally just refer to things as being sites or for clubs / schools. So just if you can treat the terms as being agnostic, so when I do refer to a club or a school, they are essentially that the tools available are common to both. All right, so I'm now going to just go through to, I'll just clear a couple of these away. I'm just going to go to a site that we use for demonstration purposes and log in. If you do not have a login, we're going to, I'm going to assume most people here do already have a login. I will talk to you briefly about user access control and how to obtain a login if you don't have one. There is also, if you need help with that, please do email through to support@sportsground.com and we will be able to, someone there will be able to help you out.
A question that's been asked is, if you are an administrator for more than one site, can you use the same login? Yes, you can use the same login to access more than one site.
But to also answer another question where we sometimes see people sharing a login between multiple people, that's not recommended. You can, we recommend that everyone does have their own login. All right, so there's no difference in cost to have your own login, and it will help you avoid trampling over someone else in the service. Now that I'm logged in, hopefully you can see that the page construction is now a little bit different than we saw in the public view mode. So by being logged in, it's now introduced these grid lines that go around the different content blocks on the page. I'm just going to talk through the way the page is constructed, and then we're going to dive into a bit more detail in terms of managing content. So remember, this first section is around managing website content, and we'll then get into news, e-newsletters, mobile app, etc. And so in terms of managing content, there are distinct sections going on each page. I'll come back to the header in a moment, but there's a header area here. The header, whatever goes up in here, will appear across every site, every single page on your site in common. There's also a menu area. Obviously, the menu remains visible across all of your pages as well. I'll come back to the menu in terms of editing that content. Down the very bottom of the site, there's a footer, which behaves in the same way as the header. In terms of, again, you're able to edit that content and it will appear on every page. In terms of page content itself, exists within what we refer to as sections. So a section is identifiable by these little icons on the left. So I can see here is a section, and sitting down underneath it, there is another section. Now, you'll notice that within these sections, there happens to be this top section. There are two pieces of content, some text on the left-hand side and an image on the right. The next section down has 3 columns of content. All right, so the very first thing, and I realize that many of you will already be ahead of this point, but there'll be some bits and pieces in here that you're probably not aware of. So in terms of defining the number of columns is done through the settings cog for a section. So I'm just hovering over here where the mouse is on the left. If I click that, I can see that currently it's set to be 2 columns wide. I could simply click to change that if I wanted it to be 3 columns wide, in which case you can see that it's automatically resized the content that was there and introduced a third column across on the right. Okay, so in terms of that kind of the ability, you don't need to think about manually resizing things. You can simply go change the settings as easily as that, and the system will handle that for you automatically. Other things that in relation to sections, I'm just going to jump back into the section settings. There are a few other things you could do in here as well. I could set a background for a section, and we saw earlier on some video background, for example, in that underwater hockey example. So I could upload a video, I could upload a background image to a section. So if you imagine a section as being effectively like layers, where you can have a whole site background, then you can have a section background, and then of course content sitting on top. The other thing I'll just show you in here as well is that I could decide what borders, how thick do I want these margins between my content and for my section. Right, so this is the area that I can simply manage sections. Some of you may not be aware, you can have your sections to be full screen width. So if I was to click full screen width and save this, we can see now that my section is now stretched right across the width of the screen. Now, in terms of, remember that this is dynamic. Different people that are viewing your site, they might be viewing it on a mobile phone, could be viewing it on a low resolution monitor, or a very, very high retina display monitor. The system doesn't, it won't, it'll take care of whatever the viewport or whatever the size of the screen is that someone's viewing the site. And I'll show you how that works in a moment in relation to mobile. So I'm just going to put that back into just into a foreground area rather than full screen width. And then we'll talk about managing the content itself. So in terms of adding content into one of these columns, is as simple as clicking an add content button. And coming in here, I can see a list of all these different widgets. So this is all the different type of content that we could be putting into any position. So for example, a Google map, video from YouTube, Twitter feed, drop-down lists, document lists, buttons, right? So again, you can't really break anything in here. So, you know, my advice would be to actually go and experiment with some of these and just explore them. We don't have enough time this evening to cover every single widget and all of the options available. So I'm going to go into a couple of the widgets, talk about some main settings and some of the other advanced functionality that you may not be aware of, and simply where to find, where to find more information. So since I'm in here adding content, as if, for example, I'll just go and add a YouTube video. So it's letting me put in a YouTube URL. So I'll just go off to YouTube. I'm just going to go, I've just gone to a video on YouTube. I'm just going Control-C to copy its URL. And then I'm going to go back to my organization, paste that URL into here and save it. I can see that it's brought that video straight into that position for me, right? So we do use YouTube for video hosting. So YouTube simply has become kind of the world standard for video. So it does mean that if you are taking your own video, you'll want to upload it to YouTube first, and then simply go and grab that address for YouTube. Once I've got content on the screen, I just point out as well that these little icons for every single content block. So a few different things here. One is there's one that looks like 4 arrows in different directions. That's drag handles. So using that means I can drag and actually drop that content into a different position. So in terms of building up content and moving content around, it's pretty simple using the drag handles. Again, that's going to be within the limitation of whatever level site you're at, because the free sites will only have a certain number of widgets tall or content blocks tall as to what you're allowed. Equally, I could go, the next little icon is a settings icon. So the settings icon would simply take me back into whatever the settings are relevant for that particular widget. So I could go and make changes to that widget if I wanted to. And then lastly, the icon icon on the very right is a trash can icon. So if I click that, I can go and delete the widget. Okay, and move that content back out. I'm just going to shift this back to 2 columns just to make it a little bit clearer as I get into this in a little bit more detail. So I pointed out one of the adding content, one of the content types is text. Text is pretty well what you see is what you get editor. So when I go and introduce a text widget, it will automatically bring in the ability to edit inline and save that text, change the font, etc. So as a, for example, having gone and I could then go and say I want to make this bright red. I can change its font size up to whatever I like, save it out. You're probably already aware of that, and editing in text in terms of inline text is pretty cool, but there will be some other bits and pieces that you may not be aware of in terms of how much you can extend your site using this text editor. So as a, for example, Recent additional functionality that's been introduced is the ability to embed media in here as well. So that's within the text widget. And that could be all the way down to an image, which means you could actually put an image in line with text. Equally, we've introduced intelligence within this text editor. That means if you were to go off, for example, and I'll just go and grab this, go, for example, and find something like a tweet. I could go off, copy a link to a tweet, go back to my site, simply go paste that link into a text area, and it will automatically embed that tweet into the text area for me. As I'm doing this, I just point out we're obviously working in edit mode where we can see these grid lines, which is something that the world at large can't see. At any point in time, I can click this view button, and it'll display to me the way that people actually see my site in terms of general public. So in this case, we can see the text I edited, and we can see the tweet that I just embedded straight into that text area. Okay, so jumping back and forward between going between edit mode and public view mode by using that view icon or view button is something that I definitely encourage. It makes it really easy to see as you're building up page content and reassure you as to exactly what the public view is. So although it's very, very similar, obviously it's slightly different because of the grid lines, etc. I'm just going to delete that content block out of that area. Having shown you the fact you can do things like embed video, embed tweets, embed Facebook, embed images, etc. in the text widget, makes you realize how much you can actually extend just within that one widget, where you might only have one widget deep available to you. I'll jump into a couple of other things really quickly. So one is, in terms of when you are building page content, I'm just going to now go up and talk a little bit about the menu. I'll come back to some actual page content shortly. The menu itself is available for you to customize pretty well however you like. On the free sites, there are a whole bunch of default pages, and you'll recognize the ones that are currently hidden because they'll have a strike through them. A new feature that's been introduced is the ability to conceal a page from the menu even when it's not necessarily hidden. So the difference between so I'm going to talk to this really quickly because it's helpful when you're editing page content. So what you're able to do is actually from a page, you can go and click on this little pencil icon. You could decide to conceal a page from the menu. And by concealing a page from the menu, it will change the page name to italics. And it just means that when someone's actually viewing your site, just let that reload, we can see that that particular page does not exist in the menu anymore. Right, so in this case, it's generally, most people wouldn't conceal their home page, although in this, some people do like to conceal it to reduce clutter. Again, if I wanted to display a menu, I can come back and display it in the menu. Right, so again, hovering over any of these pages, clicking on the pencil icon will let you see some of the things that you can do within the menu itself. So as if, for example, I could move page contents around. So if I wanted to move this page, by clicking on move, I could actually move this to make the page fall under a different page if I wanted. It's currently under main menu. And I can also control what position on that page I want it to be positioned into. So that way you can actually very easily move page content around and have it appearing in different positions. That's in terms of same thing in terms of doing things like renaming a page. So if I wanted to rename a page, right, I can simply go click on rename and go and put whatever name I want over it. It's gone through to that page for me. Again, if I look at sub-menu items or sub-menu pages, each of those also has their own menu in terms of what's available to them. I won't dwell too much onto those. I'll probably point out just a couple of things that are relatively new. One is that you can set a page to link just straight out. So if I set this, I could actually introduce a link to an It could be, for example, if my sponsor was Toyota, I could literally have a page called Toyota that links out to their website, right? So, or it could be linking out to a national body or to some rules or anything else that you think is relevant. Once a link's set, then it would simply mean that anyone that navigates to my site and clicks on that, navigates to that page, clicks on the page, it will automatically just take them straight out to that linked site. Just again, highlighting other things that are kind of a little bit recent or new. You've also got the ability to manage the URL. So by default, when you create pages, move pages, etc., or rename pages, it will automatically give them a URL. So I'm talking about what appears up in the address bar up here. If you do have your own domain name, or if you simply want to have a better looking name, which we normally refer to as a vanity URL, so you want to tell people to sign up to myclub.co.nz/register or sign up, you could go and explicitly state that in here, and it will actually let you set the name of a URL to be whatever you like. So it's handy if you're doing other promotional things like posters, radio, etc., to be able to give someone a URL that's probably a little bit easier to remember than the way that Sporty may automatically create URL names for you.
Can you explain the difference between hide and conceal?
Yes, Joe's just reminded me to explain the difference between hide and conceal. Hide will have this strike through, and it means that no one can navigate to that page even if they know its address. Conceal means that it can't be found in your menu, but you could navigate there if you do know the address of that URL, which means conceal can be quite handy if you have a very large number of pages, but you're wanting to keep your navigation quite simplified, in which case you might decide to conceal a whole bunch of pages from your menu so not to confuse people, and maybe you give them buttons or links to get to those pages in other ways that you want to drive traffic. The other things I could do to my menu, I can style my menu. So in here I can decide, did I want my menu in terms of the alignment, like left, centered, right aligned, etc. I can choose the font for my menu, the background color. We can see in the background here that I've got this, this light blue. Maybe I'll try changing that to a dark blue. I can decide if my background's going full width, which it currently is. A few other things in here that are kind of cool. One is you can decide to lock your menu to the top, which means that when people visit your site and scroll down the screen or scroll down the page, your menu will be what we call sticky. It will stay at the top. You can do things like move the position of your menu to display it above your header. There's also an option to display what's called a mega menu. An example of that, if I look at the website for Lindisfarne College, for example. So mega menu just simply means that it changes the format of the menu from being a straight drop down to being this mega sort of display, and with the ability to put in images, etc., that are relevant for whatever that menu content is. While I'm in this menu settings area, I'll just point out as well that this is where you can set a logo that will appear up on the left of your menu. And you can also decide if you want to link that logo somewhere, so that if these days people commonly would expect, if they do see a logo up in your menu, they will probably expect to be able to click on it and be taken back to your home page. So logos tend to be commonly used for that. Right, so all I've done in here at the moment is I simply changed my color to be a different blue. If I simply go and save that out, I can see that my menu background has changed that blue. Obviously there are other things in there I could control, right down to the hover over color and other bits and pieces. I'm now just going to go and add an image into a content position. So it brings me through to image settings. It's going to automatically show me my my gallery and image settings. In here, I could choose an image that's already exists in my gallery, or I could go and upload an image, in which case it will upload it from my drive for me. I'll just choose one from my gallery. Advanced settings that are now available in here, if I click on the settings cog at this point, it actually lets me do a whole bunch of different stuff. So it's automatically happens to have brought in this photo happened to be a professional photo that had a caption stored against the photo. So it's made that available to me automatically if I wanted to display the caption for the photo that's come through, and it gives the accreditation of the photo, etc. I could link the photo out somewhere if I want. So, it could be, again, linking out to more information about whatever the image relates to, or it could be an image saying, sign up now or register now. I could be linking them to an online form or through a document, etc. We've also introduced now a whole bunch of advanced options. These are deliberately hidden away, so it's not too daunting when you come in here. But you can now go and do a whole bunch of extra stuff over the top of an image. So including, I could have text overlay over the top of an image. I could introduce multiple buttons over the image. I can decide how I want the button to appear and how it's going to be in terms of styled, where it's going to be placed, etc. Right, so there's a whole bunch of different stuff that I could do for in terms of the way an image appears. I've just left this with defaults, which is not attempting to do any of the extra advanced stuff. But the principle that I guess I'm trying to communicate is just how easy it is, or to go off and have a look in settings and see where there are advanced settings. New things, for example, for the text widget, introducing in its settings, you can go and decide how much padding you want around it. You could go and apply a drop shadow around the box. So if we view the way that appears, for example, you can see it's introduced this drop shadow. I could have gone into the settings and said I actually want a bit more spacing. So I'm going to put this up to 15, for example, in which case it's introduced greater spacing around the in this area. So it's let it breathe a little bit more. All right, so again, I'd encourage you, because we don't have time to go over every single widget and all of the settings available to every widget, is I'd say the easy thing to do is just use one of your spare pages, set that page to be concealed from menu, and unhide it if it is hidden, and just set it to be concealed instead. And then you can merely experiment, build content, do whatever you like, and see how it appears. There is a tips and tricks website for those of you that are really interested in getting your site looking great, sort of from a designer's perspective. There's a bunch of really good hints in here that talk about perspective and just tricks in terms of making things look great. All right, so that's we'll make sure there's a link from the main Sporty homepage through to sporty.co.nz/tips and tricks. Just going back in terms of into content, header and footer behave in a similar way. So I'm just going to shoot down to the footer. So again, it behaves like any other section. You can go and add content into your footer area. The only difference between that and the body text is simply that obviously your footer will appear on every single page. So footers are most commonly used for contact details and contact information. But we also now increasingly see people putting social media icons down there, perhaps sponsor logos if you want your sponsors to appear on every single page. There is, just while I'm down here, I'll probably just point out, there is another type of widget in here called column splitter. So if I want to make a column get even smaller, I can go off and split my column into different sections within an individual column. So if I show you the way that appears, I'm just going to save that. What it's done is it's gone, whereas that was a column that was the width of this one on the left, now it's actually gone and introduced two widgets, or two columns wide within this one, within what was previously a single column. All right, so I guess if you think about that, given that this could be 4 columns wide and each of those could be split down into 2, means you could have 8 columns running across in this area here, as a for example. All right, so I'm just going to delete that one out.
Maybe the hide on the header and the footer sometimes.
Yeah, Joe just pointed out for the, you can hide your header or footer. So you do have the ability, it's got this little eye icon, so you can actually have it hidden so that you're not displaying it at all. And it's quite common like this site where we're not using the header, we're doing everything up with the navigation, including our logo. So no need to keep the header running in here. I'm just going to now go through and go into a couple of other areas really quickly. So up the very top of the screen is the site settings button. Site settings brings this menu that lets me just manage a whole bunch of different things to do with that are kind of site-wide. One is that there's some different things on the left. Menu we've already gone to, it's just another way of reaching the area where you can edit the style of your menu. Background is worth me mentioning really quickly. It lets me go and put in a background wallpaper for my site. So for example, I could go and upload wallpaper. So I could go and upload an image here if I wanted to. I can make it behave differently in terms of the way that if someone visiting my site on a mobile, if I'm saying, hey, look, it's not relevant for them to see this great big image in the background, I could just use a color for them instead. And I do also have the ability to set an overlay that would introduce a foreground area. So if I maybe show the way that appears with an overlay. Right, so what I've done is I've introduced this background. I set the overlay to be white for the whole site, which means that now the area you can see in terms of page content, I could have, it's probably not an especially well chosen image because all we've got is some legs of people in free fall. But you get the theme in terms of the way that you could, for example, it's common for people to put their grounds, etc. With that background settings, it may be more relevant for me to have that my overlay is not fully transparent, in which case you can see as I'm using this slider, I'm changing the way that my overlay, the level of transparency, in which case if I save that out, you can see that my overlays now become semi-transparent. If I view the way that appears to the public, you can see the way that the site appears. Just back into edit mode, back into that site settings area, a couple of other things that I'll point out really quickly. I can change the default text for my site, so I could choose whatever font. So if I change this, for example, to Comic Sans, maybe change my color, I'll make it quite garish just to make it obvious, and then go off and change that. You can see it's automatically changed my default font within that text area. The reason for having that font as a default area simply means that now whenever I go and add text content, it will automatically bring in my color and my font. So I'm not having to explicitly set it every time within a text area. That's going to be really, really horrible to try and read. So I'm just going to put that back. I'll just leave it there for the moment. Other things that I could do in defaults, there's the ability now to set a default button style. So if I wanted my buttons to, by default, to be a particular color, including having a border, I can set them to have rounded corners and even decide what radius or how rounded I want them, etc. So again, if you haven't done this, I would encourage you to set up button defaults because it just means it makes it really easy. Any button you then add to your site will automatically inherit these same characteristics, so they'll all look similar and follow that common theme as each other. Right, so again, just pointing out through these general site settings, same thing, I could change my default borders for my sections. So if I wanted a site to be really spaced out or very close together, I can manage that in here. Other things in here are assets that are available just for my organization. So things like news, images, documents, etc. These are things that you can manage and update for your site, but not necessarily display them if you don't want to. So for example, there's a document storage area and an image storage area that just by virtue of uploading an image doesn't mean it's going to necessarily display on any page. It just is an area for you for storage that you can then call on those images or those documents whenever you want them. I'm going to drill into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. So we'll just come back to that. Other things we can do in here really quickly, I'm just going to point out browser settings. So this is an area that is a little bit more advanced. When someone goes and searches for your site, the way that Google will index your site and in terms of how it will appear in search results is dictated largely by the settings that you set in here. So these are the most important things that's picked up by Google. So as for example, the title for your site and also the meta description for your site. So generally you're not going to be trying to stuff these with keywords. You'll try and make them relevant to your organization and something that if people are searching for your organization name or your sports code or your type of school, that the search terms in here will be picked up on. The way that whatever meta description you put in here, when you go and search for something in Google, so for example, the content that appears down in this text in here is whatever you have set back in this area here. So Google will faithfully put whatever you put there will be what appears in Google in here. So if you haven't done this already, you should do it, because otherwise Google will just grab text from your homepage or from your site. Okay, so that's the meta description. If you're wanting sites statistics, there's an area here for you to put in Google tracking code for Google Analytics, so you can get advanced site tracking. Same thing if you're doing Facebook tracking using the Facebook Pixel. Right, so there are other bits and pieces you can do in here. Down the very bottom, a browser icon, which must be a PNG type of file. So what that refers to is what appears up in this little area up here, right? So you can dictate what's going to appear in someone's browser window. Right, so that's the area in terms of managing that kind of those site settings. I'm now going to jump through to, again, back to the widget content. I'm going to leave it for you to explore this. I will come and return to show you the newsfeed widget in a moment, as well as the notices widget, because they have some special functionality. But first of all, I just want to take you off now to the dashboard area.
Possibly just a super quick one before you move out of the website side of it. Lots of people have asked in relation to adding content and coming up with the limit of the content that you can add. Could you just explain that in a little bit more detail?
Right, so in terms of if you go to add content and you get a message saying that you've reached the limit of content, that's probably because you're on a free site or a free or next to free site plan. If you go back from the Sporty homepage, click on the online support and literally just type the search. Maybe I'll do this really quickly. Right, so there's an article here that explains the difference between what we call free sites and VIP sites. So there it talks about the limitations in terms of the amount of content on a page. So really, in very rough terms, a free site comes with about 100 pages of content, but where there's a maximum number of widgets deep within the sections. To remove those limits, you'd need to go to a VIP or paid plan. The pricing for that is on the Sporty, back on the Sporty homepage. Our pricing is published there, so you're able to see what the different levels are. All the way up to, for those organisations, where you could have a fantastic looking site for some of the national sports organisations, or many of the regional sports organisations, or many of the colleges around the country that are using a full VIP site where there's no limit to the content. Right, so if you do encounter that warning message, it'll simply be encouraging you to go to a VIP plan. And just to be clear, we are not, we make no bones about this. At the end of the day, although we probably have 80% of usage on the Sporty platform, people using the free services. At the same time, if you do have budget or can find funding, please do look at the VIP options. It helps keep everything else that is free forever free, including some of the neat stuff that I'll be showing you shortly this evening. I'm just going to jump now through into this link up the top left of your site, which is a dashboard link. Right, so clicking through into the dashboard gives me a bunch of tiles on the screen background. So every organisation, so every club and school in New Zealand has this dashboard view, and in here there's a bunch of things we can do that's a little bit more than just managing website content. The managing website area that we were just in was actually reached. I could get back there by going back in through this manage websites tile. I might shortly. But when I was showing you the site settings before from that black drop-down menu at the top of my site, I referred to documents and media and images, etc., and news. So I could reach those same areas by coming to my dashboard and clicking in through here is just another way of reaching the same area for managing documents, images, etc. I'm going to go through these really quickly. If I look at the documents and media manager, this is an area that I can create folders on the left. So there's a create folder button, and then I can go and add files or upload resources into here. In terms of resources, that includes media files such as for example, a audio recording, as well as PDFs, Excel spreadsheets, and Word documents, etc. Generally, I would encourage you to upload and keep a copy of whatever document in its what we call the native or the raw format, like a Word document or whatever. You can get the system to automatically convert them to PDF on upload. Otherwise, you can upload the raw document and you can actually click a button over here that will convert it to a PDF for you and let you keep both versions up here. Now, the reason for why convert to a PDF is simply because not everyone has Word or Excel. So if you are uploading files that are that format, it's friendly to actually use a PDF version. Once a document is uploaded up here, it's then available for you to do a number of things with. It means it's now stored online, so it's stored in the cloud. The first advantage of that is that if I think back to prior to cloud storage, people would probably have a copy of their constitution or whatever resources or documents would be sitting on someone's computer. Whether they're a staff member or a volunteer, there's always a risk associated just with having that local copy on someone's computer. So they either leave your organisation or they lose their files on their computer or whatever, and you've lost that document. So we do recommend keeping cloud copies of your documents. If you're simply putting them here associated with your organisation or with your website, just creates an area that makes it very easy for you to manage them, or for anyone else that's following you next year or the year after, to be able to come and find those resources. Yep. Yeah, so Joe's just reminded me that there are a couple of new things that are available in here. One is that there is now the ability to replace a file for a document. This is relevant because once a document's put up into storage, I could display it on my site. I can go and actually get a link to that document URL. So if I go and copy that, for example, means that I could open it directly in a browser. But I could go and put that out in an email, or I could post it to Facebook or whatever, in which case anyone that clicks that link, it will open my document. So in this case, I copied a link to a particular document. Right, if I was to go and open that up, right, so just by virtue of going to that unique URL or link means that someone will be able to go to that document. And the bit that Joe was pointing out was that for any particular document, I could go off, I can rename it, but importantly, I could replace the file. Now that's relevant because if I have published that link somewhere, so if I've emailed someone a link, for example, to our 2021 rules or our complaints policy or whatever, our constitution or whatever, and that then changes, if I was just to go and delete that file, then obviously I've effectively broken that link that people might have either bookmarked, or it could be in their email history, or it could be on Facebook or whatever. So by replacing the file, lets me go off and choose a different document that will simply replace the existing document and keep the link exactly the same, right? So it means that wherever that document, anyone with a link to that original document, if they were to follow it, they will now see your new document, the one that you've replaced it with. I'm going to jump out of this area because again it's very well covered in our support, and hopefully that makes sense in terms of a document storage area.
Just quickly, there's no limit to the number of documents and images that you can upload and store as well. That's something that's being raised.
Yeah, so no limit to storage. We'll just click through into the images area, and this is very similar in a lot of ways to the similar to the document storage. Again, bunch of folders on the left. I can go off and create a new folder if I want, and I can merely go and upload images into any of these folders. I can also do things like rename a folder, create subfolders, delete folders, etc. Right, so this is simply a storage area for images. And once an image is up there, I can actually go and set some settings around the image. So for example, set a caption or a default place for that image to link through to. Right, so I can, in terms of managing images, is fairly straightforward. I will now just jump through into the news and e-newsletters area. News again has its own repository, so there's an area for me to manage news articles. So news articles, so I've got an add article button. I can see some articles that have already been added. To add an article, clicking the button, I can then simply give the article a title. So for example, give it a title. I could then go and put in, by default, it introduces the date that the article was added. I don't need to keep that if I don't want. I could go and simply delete that out if I don't necessarily want it to be timestamped. And then this is again just an area. It is a bottomless cut. So if I go down here, and again I could go and merely embed photos, embed other media in here. But I'd also encourage you to add a photo back in by simply going and adding a photo, either uploading one or putting one into an image position, because that will automatically set the thumbnail, the image that is available for that news article. It's automatically given me the ability to display a photo caption where it's read one in with the photo. I simply go and save that article. What I'll also do in here is just refer really quickly to categories. So you're able to categorize a news article. So you can create your own categories simply by adding them into this news area and call them whatever you like. So whatever's relevant for your community. So in the world of sport, often it'll be seniors, juniors, etc. For schools, again, it could be around different parts of the school or different uses. The reason that you will categorize that, giving an article a category is useful is because when we go back to the website, there are news widgets that will pick up automatically where we can set them to say which category of news we want that particular widget to display. So for example, I could set a category called juniors, and then on my website, I could have a news feed that just displays news articles for juniors. So for example, if I had a section of my site that was relevant for juniors, I could set a news feed in there that just brings through juniors content for juniors. Other things I could do in here, just super quick. Again, you'll become used to these icons. So trash can to go off and delete an article. I could move articles around by using the drag handles just to go and shift the position of different articles. And I can hide them, etc. So that's the area for managing articles. I'm going to jump back to the website now just to really quickly show you the way that news then can present through onto the site. So I'm just going to go back through my website's tile and update my main website. It's an area there that shows the difference between different plans. I'll just tidy this up a little bit. So I'm actually just going to add a section in here that's single column wide. And I'm going to go and add content where I go and add a news feed. So the newsfeed widget, again, I'll let you experiment with these settings yourself in your own time, but the key thing here that you may not be aware of is we've introduced quite an advanced grid layout for news articles, in which case I can decide, it will introduce my articles as cards within that position on my page. I can decide however I want them to appear, and then I can choose what's actually going to display within each article. So I could turn on and off things like whether it's going to display a heading, the snippet, other bits and pieces. For the moment, I'm just going to choose the default, and I'll set it to be, say, just 3 articles. And here is where I could choose the categories of articles that I wanted to display. So my example before was if I'd tagged something to just be juniors, I could go off and select juniors in here. If none is selected, it just brings through all articles. So by clicking save, what it's done is it's brought through these 3 articles, which are my 3 most recent articles from my news storage area. I view the way that appears to the public. I'm going to have to forgive the way the site's starting to look a little bit messy. We can see that it's automatically brought these through. Now, where that's kind of cool means that now simply by going and adding a new article, so long as it's the correct category or no category, it will automatically just introduce the article in here as the most recent one of these 3 for you. Someone that comes through and wants to read the article, it will open it up in its own page. From there, they can do things like share it out to Facebook, Twitter, etc. You, of course, yourself, if you do have a Facebook for your own organisation, you could share it yourself to Facebook. And that's kind of cool when you think about it, because it means that you're not needing to explicitly go and put the same article content created on Facebook. You can simply do it once in one area in your news article area, and it will automatically post it to your website, post it to Facebook, or let you post it to Facebook. And we'll go to a couple of other places as well that I will show you now. I'm just going to jump back to my dashboard and just point out back into that news and e-newsletters area, there is the ability in here to create a newsletter. So we have a newsletter builder facility. The old one that you may have been used to over the last few years is being retired. So please, if you are still using the old e-newsletter builder, please, this button will be removed. It was meant to be gone in December. We've got a few people hanging on to it. So we want to just encourage you to try that new e-newsletter builder, please. New e-newsletter builder is really powerful. It lets you start building a newsletter from scratch or open an existing one. I'm just going to go into a recent one that I have here. It's similar to building page content for your website, for a website page. So it works on a concept where I can go and click an add content button, choose text, image, buttons, news articles. By choosing news articles, it's actually will simply go and bring in automatically the articles back from my news area. So again, I could choose categories if I want for those. Again, I've just gone off and it's brought in those top 4 articles that happen to be in my news area. All right, so again, excuse the duplication, I'll just delete this one. These again work in a similar way. I can change settings, I can delete them, I can drag them around. So what we're doing here is we're building an e-newsletter. I can put buttons in, etc. The way that appears when it goes into someone's inbox, I can have a preview to see what it is that they're going to get. In terms of how it then gets sent, I would simply be able to save that. Again, it's saving it back into a folder. I'm just letting it replace the one that was there. And it's taking me through to an area where for me to send it. So in here, I can choose in the next section, next part of this workshop this evening, we're going to talk about forms and databases, etc. So I'll jump into that in a moment. So I could go and choose any of the existing forms and databases I have. Alternatively, I could go and send it to a custom list, in which case I could copy a column out of Excel, for example, pop it into here and hit send, and my newsletter will go out to those people. It's very easy, obviously, to go and try this experiment with it, because you could just come in here and use a custom list and just put only your own email address in, send yourself an e-newsletter and see how it works and that you're happy with it. The other cool part with this new e-newsletter builder as opposed to the old one is you can have multiple templates. So you could have a default template for juniors or for funding partners or for sponsors or whatever. stakeholders, committee members, board members. So it lets you go in and simply reuse those templates to send out to whatever particular community you have. When you're happy with it, the final thing to do would be to hit send, in which case your e-newsletter has gone out to its recipients.
Did you get your own list mentioned?
Yep, so that was mentioned, doing it to your own list. Probably the, I'll look at administrators. I'd also just point out that if you're not, that there is also the ability to send or to use a mobile app. There is both a custom version as well as a generic Sporty version of the mobile app available for you on both the App Store and Google Play. So all you do is go and download the app that's set to Sporty NZ. If you're just using the free version, that's fine. Any member of your community can download this. Simply go to find your club, school or association. They only need to do that once. It will set it in their app for them, and when they go back to the app next time, it will automatically be updating with content driven from your website, including things like your newsfeed, Facebook, etc. Equally, there is the ability to send push notifications to your app directly from your site. So if you wanted to alert people to whatever events, cancellations, other bits and pieces, you can do that. We do have a custom app service as well, so we're managing things like for schools, absentee reporting, game day scoring, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I won't jump into right now. Very last place I'm taking you through to finish this session is, but it's relevant for, I said we've got a bunch of new people that have joined us for the getting ready for the next session, is the login and access control area. So in here, you've got the ability to set other people to be an administrator to give them login access for your site. So in here, if I wanted to add someone new, I can simply go and click this invite new user button. And it's as simple as putting in their email address, first name, last name, and deciding what access you want to actually give them to your site. So email, first name, last name, and then down here I'd simply decide, are they going to have access right across my entire website? Am I giving them access to all of my forms and databases, etc.? When you're happy with those settings, you send invite, and it will send them the ability automatically to click on a link to obtain login access for your organisation. Okay, so Joe, I might just go to if there are any specific questions that I haven't covered for this first session.
Yep, just sort of limit on the number of administrators. You can have as many administrators as you want to, but just be aware that they do have access to the back end of your site that you're looking at. A few people have asked about when you send a newsletter, what email address does it come from? By default, it picks up the email of the person who created the newsletter, but at any time you can actually change that and customize it so it doesn't have to be sent from you. It could be a generic club email address. Questions in relation to if you make a mistake, what happens? Can you revert and can you go back? There's not a if you're editing a text area and make a mistake and have saved it, there's not a revert to go back to it. But what you can do is you can hide a page if you're working on it so that no one can see it before you actually make it publicly visible.
Yeah, the text area itself is probably the area just to be, probably most cautious, because every other widget is actually just calling on underlying content from the site somewhere, which means, an image that's in your image repository or a document or whatever, in which case you could merely go delete one of those widgets and simply put it back, right? So it's not a massive hassle. The text area itself does support undo. So it means that if you were to go and delete something, so long as you haven't deleted the entire widget itself, you can go and undo text within there. But if you are concerned about building up content that takes a long time to type out text or whatever, I would suggest doing it in Word and then just copy and paste it straight from Word into a text area. That way you've kind of got a backup of it within Word. Is that it for those?
Those are the main questions that were answered, other than in the free version versus what you can do on that.
Great. So guys, that concludes the session in relation to the website communications, content management, and the main functionality within the website side of things. We obviously, where it is a bit of a speed session, and that's very much tip of the iceberg as to what's possible. You saw those examples of some of those sites that I showed at the start of the session. Please do look at go through the Sporty homepage and to see a lot more. We are going to be posting more advanced videos for people that want to, I guess, get a slightly more advanced sessions as opposed to this evening's webinar. So we will be communicating and circulating some of that information out to you shortly. So I'm just going to, now we're going to go kick straight into the second session. So this session now is about online registrations, renewal of members, team construction using the team builder side of things, team entries, etc. I'm just going to point out, I'll just go back to the Sporty homepage for those people that have only just joined us. I'm just going to point out, just as a reminder for anyone that didn't see this at the very start of the first session, is that the only real address you need to remember is sporty.co.nz. So through here, there is the online support link, and that'll take you through to all of the stuff we're covering this evening is available through the online support. There's also, if your sports code is rugby, netball, touch, football, league, softball should be up here, it's not at the moment. And a number of the other codes that we work with at a national level or a regional level, then you will find some specific instructions for you by going through to this page. So it links out to resources that are relevant just to you and your code. The other thing I'm just going to point out finally is that every organisation in New Zealand does, every sports club, association, national body and school in New Zealand is listed where there is a place for you to go find your organisation and log in. So you can do this through this Find Your Club or School button if you don't know how to get there already. Once you do get there, what I might do just super quickly is just as a reminder to people, when you do find the place for your organisation, you don't need to go through the Sporty homepage every time. It will have its own web address, regardless of whether or not you have your own URL. It will actually have a Sporty URL as well, so you can bookmark this and go to it directly, so you don't need to go through the Sporty homepage each time. When you get there, although you may not necessarily be using Sporty for a website, that's completely over to you. Still, for managing registrations, renewals, etc., you will come to that address for your organisation and hit the admin login down the bottom. Again, just to, as a repeat from what I said a little earlier, was that if you don't have login details or know how to log in, then please, we will either follow up with you after the session or contact support@sportsground.com. Hopefully, if you do have details to log in, as simple as logging in here, you can go and register and create your own login if you want for your organisation here as well. So I'm just going to log in which case I'm now seeing that same site in edit mode. I'm not here to talk about websites at the moment. I'm here to talk about registrations and member management and databases. So the area that I've gone through to is by clicking that dashboard icon or dashboard button at the top left of your page. And again, just to reiterate, every organisation in New Zealand does have a dashboard available to it like this, every club and school. If you happen to be an administrator for more than one organisation, so your login can work for multiple organisations, and you can go and change between them simply by clicking this drop down here to change, and it will know whatever organisations your login has permission for. So the area I want to take you to first is this online registrations tile. So online registrations takes us through to a bunch of folders on the left and a bunch of web forms and databases on the right. So if your sports code is one that is, or if you're associated with a sports organisation that is using the Sporty network, like New Zealand Rugby Union, Rugby League, Touch, etc., you will see the official registration form for your sport will exist in one of these folders for you automatically. Right, and that's the same for football clubs. If you have connected to Comet, it will automatically read in your player database for you, so you will be able to see all of your members from last season or last year. Right, so on the left we've got folders, on the right we've actually got databases. In terms of the individual databases, what I'll do is, before I jump into looking at data, I'm just going to show you there is a form builder, so you can go off and create your own web input form as well. So we will actually talk about official forms that have come through from either your netball centre or from New Zealand football or New Zealand rugby or rugby league. But I'm also going to show you can go and create your own form by clicking this form builder or add new form button. This is relevant even if you're using the official form for your sports code, because you're able to actually add your own fields relevant to you to the bottom of the official form as well, if you wish. So in this area, I can go in and give a form a name. Sign up form or something. I can decide if this form's related to a particular season. It may or may not be related to a particular sport. Again, this is just to help me organize content. I'm just going to go down super quick down through these fields. So just a reminder, what we're doing here is this is a form builder that's letting us create a web input form. So if you've used Google Forms or Wordfoo Forms or some of those other form builders, similar concept. Ultimately, at the end of this, when we've saved it, we will be able to send people a link to this form, and they will be able to then go and complete whatever question fields we've added to this form. In here, there's a requirement to put in a from email. That's because if the form itself sends out, so when someone completes the form, it's got the ability to send them a confirmation email just to show them the information they submitted. People, even if you say don't reply to this, they often will, in which case, where's their reply going to go back to? It'll go back to whatever is the from email address that you've set in here. There are some advanced options in here as well, so you could do a few other things, whether or not you want to set a copy to be emailed to the person that completes it. If you want a copy of it to be emailed to you or someone else within your organisation, I could set a start date and a closing date for a form. Relatively new is the ability to put custom confirmation email content in here. So for those of you that actually signed up for this workshop, it would have automatically emailed you a confirmation email including the webinar link, and that was simply because we had added it, set it in here. Back down to the form itself, you've got the ability to set introductory text for your form. This is just a form editor, so you could go and put in things like information about your season, information that's could be about your subs or fees, costs, dates, etc. In here, you've got the ability to include links, so you could put links out to guideline documents, out to terms and conditions, out to any other bits and pieces that you like. And now we're down into the actual question area of the form in terms of the fields that people are going to fill out. So by default, some of these are necessary and required, like first name, last name, and email address. Beyond that, it's really over to you as to what the fields are, beyond any official fields that have come from your sports code, for example. So there are a whole bunch of system fields that I could choose, including a photo field, address field, etc. These system fields are clever so that they understand the type of answer that, the type of thing that someone is going to interact with. So for example, if I was to add an address field to my form, then when someone goes to complete the form, the system knows that it's expecting an address. So as the person starts to type, it will help them by offering to auto-complete the address as they go. Right? So it'll give them a drop-down of addresses. Where that's cool is that obviously it means that for you as an organisation, the addresses that you get in, not only are you making it easy for the person, you're actually getting a nicely formatted, standardised address that come in automatically with correct postcodes, etc. All right, so over to the right, I can rearrange the order of fields. I can also set as to whether or not I want to make a field mandatory by ticking the required box. I showed you some of those system fields, which is cool, but there is the ability to add as many other fields as you want that aren't limited just to the system fields. So I could go and merely just add a new section. And again, this is a bottomless cup. So in real life, the way we see this used, I saw an example I've used before is a club that actually said, will you sponsor a child's t-shirt? And so they set this up as like a sponsorship section, whatever name's relevant. And then by clicking the add question, right? And then when you put in a question, you can then decide what sort of answer are you expecting from people. So in this case, I could say, look, I'm expecting a yes/no answer, in which case it means that the data out the other end is going to be nicely normalized for me. Again, I can decide if I want that to be required. So other common examples could be around training, things like what evening, or what day do you wish to train? In which case you could then give that as a multi-choice. Again, just as an example. So I can now say, I'm going to make this multiple choice that they can choose a couple of different options. I'll pretend that we've only got access to our fields on Mondays and Fridays for training. So again, I can go and merely choose what answers are available to the person that's completing the form. There are some other advanced things I can do here that I'm not going to dwell on within this workshop, but I could add conditions, which simply means that I could have a question, are you a junior, for example, and then introduce other information that's relevant for juniors, etc. So by adding conditional questions or sections.
Just a little word of warning, be careful when you're adding conditional fields and have a look in detail. We've got some online support on it because it can get a little tricky. So note of caution. Yeah,
and again, remember that what we're doing here when we create or edit this form is when you're doing this, it is only visible to you. So you're able to go and have a look at it first before you actually take the address of that URL or a link to to the public facing part of your form before you make that available to people. So you can actually go complete it. I suggest, if you are editing and adding your own fields to a form, once you've completed it, go and actually have a look at the link yourself, complete it as if you are one of your members or someone signing up, and so that you actually see what that user experience is like. Some forms do become quite onerous with the number of fields that people are expecting, that you expect people to complete. So we just know that in terms of trying to keep that friendly for your community, as we suggest keeping it as streamlined as possible. Yep, so I pointed out the fact that there are mandatory fields by ticking the required box. While I notice it, this is a recent addition, as we have now introduced the ability for it to set a field to be admin only. If you tick that, it simply means that that field will not display to the public, and you can go off and put your own notes, etc. against that particular, so you can still complete the use that field yourself as an administrator against a record, but it won't become visible to the end users or people completing your form. Down the very bottom, we've got an area for terms and conditions for your form. So if you did have rules, for example, I agree to abide by a code of conduct or other terms and conditions, you can introduce them here. Again, it is just a straight WYSIWYG, what says what you get text editor. So you can format this, style it, create links out to documents, do whatever you like within the terms and conditions area. If you leave this blank, it simply won't appear on your public view of your form. If you do put content in here, it will automatically introduce an I accept tick box. Down the very bottom, we have the ability to add products to a form. This looks a little bit complex only because it lets you do a whole bunch of extra stuff. We could, at the very bottom, we could go, for example, and say, I want to add a product called subs. I'm going to give them a price of $100, and I can simply go and add that to my form. If you want, you can have your organization connected through to Xero, in which case, if it is connected to Xero, I could go for any of these products. I could actually go and specify a Xero account and have it automatically raise an invoice for me in Xero whenever someone completes the form or submits the form, and where it will automatically create a draft invoice using whatever account codes in Xero I want it to be using. So for any treasurers or anyone that's on the accounting side of things, this does get quite advanced. There's a lot of support around this in terms of how to use right down to tracking codes and tracking options if you want for products. Even if you're not connecting to Xero, or even if you're not accepting, if you decide you're not going to accept payments online, we would still encourage you to put products here. And the reason for that is that whatever products you add here will automatically then show as a balance owing by someone based on what they choose when they submit your form. Right, so if there are subs or socks or photos or whatever is relevant to your organisation, by adding them here means that you're able to collect that data at the same time as someone submits the form. Other things that there are some other advanced options in here. You can connect to online payments. So we use Debit Success as a payment gateway, which simply means that if you have got that enabled, you can then let people, when they submit your form, not only can they select the product, they can also pay for it online at that time by either credit card, or you can let them pay by overnight automated direct debit if you want. We do support the concept of no pay, no play, which is common in sport in some organisations. So if you want the registration not to be accepted unless payment is successful, there is an option for that as well. So again, purely optional, right? So when someone completes the form, you can do things like copy transaction receipts, etc. There is also the ability to edit your own GST number so that the GST, so the receipt does include your GST number and can be used as a tax invoice, as a legal tax invoice, if you wish. Probably just one other thing I'll point out here, by default, there's a new little option in here which is called expand, and it exists for each of these sections. So you can decide the way that your form presents to people as to whether or not it's going to present with all of these fields fully expanded and open, or whether the fields can actually be accordion style collapsed under a heading, just to make it possibly a little bit less daunting when people are completing the form. Once you're happy with your form, you would go to save your form. I'm actually going to cancel out of here and just show you probably a more realistic example of one that was prepared earlier. Joe's just directing me to where there is some data from a previous season. So in this case, we're using as for example, a club membership form. For those of you that are using official forms, you will see the official form relating to your sports code should automatically appear here for you. All right, so and for those of you that are involved in using an official form for the likes of rugby league or rugby or football, if it's connected to Comet, then you'll see your database of members from last year will automatically be visible to you in your 2020 database. Right, so coming in here, if I click on, remember I'm looking at 2020, so this is last season. So I've clicked through into a form, and what I'm calling a form, if you can just mentally remember, whenever I say form, it also equals a database, because whenever you create a web input form or you use an official one, there is always a database associated with that form. Okay, so we've simply drilled into our 2020 club membership form. If I just go from within this view, just a couple of things to point out. Obviously, we're seeing a grid of all of the people that completed a record against this form. There are a few things I could do in here. If I was an administrator and not requiring people to actually add their own records, I could go and add a new record myself by clicking the Add New button. A preference is generally, wherever possible, let people do it themselves. So most commonly, if I look in the case of, certainly if I look at club sport, then clubs are having people manage their own renewals every year, and I'll show you that, how easy that is using the magic link method in a moment. And same thing where we have colleges that are having people, either the players or parents, sign up students to renew or to sign up for whether or not they're going to participate in that sport for the new year. So in terms of college sport, we've now got, simply because of the number of sports codes that are now supported through this system, means that a college sports coordinator or teacher in charge can come in and see the databases, the official databases for a whole bunch of different sports codes and interact with those records in here. Clicking through onto an individual record will just take me through into the detail of that person or the record in terms of whoever actually completed that form. So having clicked through on this, I can see the details that they completed. And for me as an administrator, I do have the ability to modify and update this information if I know it to be that it's different. Right, so I can drill through for any of those records and see any of those details. A few other things I can do while I'm in this view. I could be doing things like manually recording payments against the record. So there's this dollar icon over to the right of a record, in which case I could actually record a payment that I'd taken manually. If I had payments turned on for this particular form, when this person registered, if they had paid online, I would see that amount automatically come through as being payable amount based on whatever product selection they did. Amount paid is based on whatever they actually successfully paid online, and balance due is obviously the difference, hopefully, that there is no balance due. Right, but I could go and record that manually against someone if I like in here as well. Equally, you could go and add notes. Each person does get a unique person ID that is different than this SP number. So the SP number is a transaction ID. So although Anna's person ID should stay the same from 1 year to the next for my organisation, this transaction ID will change because it's relevant to every single instance of registration. And Anna could be signing up for more than one thing with me. All right.
Just while we're in this view as well, a couple of people have mentioned the colour of the text underneath the date registered. So in this database, orange means it's the first time that person has registered. So some of you who have databases, you will see that some people might be appearing in black and some appearing in orange. The black one is just a visual indicator to show that that person has registered with your organisation before. Orange means it's the first time.
It's simply doing a name match between seasons to make that conclusion. So if someone has actually changed their name from a maiden name, for example, to a married name, then it could defeat this. So it is simply a visual indicator that to try and be useful for you. The same thing if someone has renewed already for the new season, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment, then their entire background to this record will go green. So it becomes very easy when we look at our last season's database to see those people that have now renewed. I'm just going to go back to my form summary or database summary screen. So just while I'm in here, I'm going to point out how to get the link to a form. So regardless of whether it's the official form that's come from your sports code or whether it's a one that you've created yourself, there are a few different icons over here on the right. One is that I could go and edit the form, in which case it'll take me back into that form builder that I showed you before. So I could modify the form fields. If you do modify the form fields, remember, of course, once the form's in use and people have completed and submitted data against a field, you don't want to change the name or the purpose of that field to something else. Otherwise, obviously, your data set underneath is going to become confused by the people that answered it before you made the changes compared to those that answered the question afterwards. So do try and, if you're wanting to retire a question, you're better probably to delete it and create a new one, or simply create a new one. Every form I mentioned does have its own unique URL. I'm just going to point out that there's this link button here, right? In which case it shows me the unique address of that form. So I could go copy a link to that form. What that's done is it's simply copied the form to my clipboard. So if I was to go and paste that into a browser, then it will show me the public view of that form. So I'll just go and have a quick look at that now. All right, so this is for that particular form, it's showing me the public view of that form. If you're not using a Sporty website, and so therefore you don't necessarily want to see the surrounding material for the public view of your form, that's fine too. You can put in your own web address in here, or Facebook or whatever you like. I'll just put in and just click to update the link. And now if I copy that URL, what that means is this would be your own web address, for example, where I put in Google, means that whenever someone submits the form, what do they see next after they submit it? It will take them back to your website or to your Facebook or whatever you've set there. So if I show you the way that that now presents, if I use that URL, it displays it as what we call a white label form. So it no longer includes any of this header, background, etc. So if you're not using a Sporty website, then we suggest using that return URL method to display a white label version. When someone completes the form, it means that so of course you could link to it from Facebook, you could use that link, publish it by connecting it to a button on your website or embedding it, but it doesn't really matter how someone gets there. This form is unique just to your organization. It is just that form. So anyone that completes, goes off and fills out that form and clicks submit, they will end up back in that database associated with this form. Okay, so in terms of getting those members there. As a practical guide for those of you, since I think the majority of people that I saw on this webinar list, majority of people are using an official version of a form, so it's come to you from your sports code or whatever, means that for you, the very first thing we suggest doing every season is come and have a look at your last season's players. So if I look at this rugby example, for example, in this case, for those of you connected to either Comet or Rugby, you'll see that it does a quick connection like that.
Can you show official form company deleted?
Yep.
So a couple of comments. If you think you should have a form from your organisation and you can't see it, please can you contact our support team to let us know, because they should all be there for your code. Yeah.
So in the case of for football organisations, you have to explicitly request it to be turned on. For rugby and for league and netball clubs and schools that are associated with netball centres, you should already see your forms back and through the online registrations area. To contact our support is support@sportsground.com. That will automatically raise a ticket. So if you cannot see a form and you think you should, that is where there is an official one that should be available to you, please contact our support and we'll have a look into it for you. So what I've just done is I've drilled into a rugby database for 2020. In this case, I'm just going to point out a couple of things in here. One is there are some, because the system knows this is rugby, it's automatically brought in some stuff in here that is specific just for the sport of rugby. So it's doing things like bringing in the New Zealand Rugby ID, weights and status according to New Zealand Rugby Union and local unions. However, it's still a useful place for me to point out a couple of other things. So I'm showing in this case, some of these have a green background. That means the system knows that those people, Bruce Bates and Roger Blue, have already registered for 2021. So it's displaying them as green to show me that they're already through. Joe's already mentioned the fact that this is black means that this person was already playing for us in 2019, the previous year. And the fact that this is orange means that they are a new player to us. For those of you that are rugby, league and softball, you guys will have a view that includes this little plus button. This is for you as the gatekeeper or administrator for your club or school to click that button to say that you recognise and approve that as being a valid player. So in the eyes of New Zealand Rugby Union, for example, a player is not considered registered until you click to approve and accept that player, right? So if you don't, if it's someone you don't recognise or someone that doesn't belong to your organisation, you are fine to go and simply, obviously try and investigate it. But if you think it's been done completely in error, you could go and delete that record if you wanted to. Otherwise, if it is someone that does belong to you, hit that plus to approve it. What that also does for those sports that have a transfer workflow, such as league and rugby union and softball, hitting that plus will also alert you to the fact that if that player has already registered within the new season with another club. So it will, if they have already registered and been approved by another club, the moment you try and approve them into your club, it'll warn you that they have already registered somewhere else for that season, and it will give you the opportunity to request a transfer, right? So the way Sporty handles transfers is through this process where we don't prevent someone from registering with a new club. They're simply unable to be approved until they've been cleared out from their previous club if it exists, right? So for obviously not relevant for the sport of netball or for some of the other sports codes, but this is how Sporty handles transfers. For football, you'll see an exclamation mark in here if they have a red flag in Comet, which means that you're unable to approve them in Sporty. So again, a few other things that I could do in here. There is a little roll forward button. So I could actually roll this person forward. So if I know that Rex Bond is coming through in 2021, I could roll that forward and it will open the record for me for the 2021 season. However, because we're pretty hot on self-management, the bit that I'll show you is the magic link method for renewals. This is really, really important because this avoids the need for any players or parents or people to have to log in to renew with you for the new season, right? So to achieve this, all you do is you go in, I'm assuming now that you've set up that you're happy with the way that your form presents for 2021, so for the current season. So again, just as a reminder, I could go in, I could have a look at my current form, I could edit it, add my own fields, add products, do whatever else I want to do within that particular form for 2021. If I go back to my 2020 database, so I'm happy that my 2021 form is ready. Over on the right of my 2020, so my previous season's database, is this email icon or email button. This is unique to Sporty and is the method by which we now re-register or renew over 500,000 people in sport in New Zealand every year. So what it does is it lets you guys can go and simply put, so as a club administrator, for example, you can go and put whatever intro text you want. This is going to generate a bulk email. So it might be information again about subs or about other bits and pieces. It's got some default text that appears in here. You don't need to use it. But the key with this is that when you click send email, it will send out to all of the people from last season, where each of those emails contains a unique magic link for each person. So they're all different from each other as an encoded link. So the person that receives that email, whether it's a player or a parent, for example, they can simply click their magic link and it will open their own record already pre-filled for them for the new season, in this example for 2021. So it means that they will be able to see whatever new fields you've added to the 2021 form, any new products, pricing, whatever. And all of the question fields will be automatically completed with their name and details. So it means that it's very easy for that person to simply update any details that may have changed, changed address, for example, and then click submit. Right, so the system's smart enough that it will exclude people who have already re-registered into the new season. Right, and it's telling me at the top that it's going to send it out to all of the people from my 2020 database. So for those organisations that are using those official forms where it's brought in that historic data, then it really becomes one-click simple for your renewals. Right, so you would simply set up that, make sure your 2021 form is as you want it, come in here and use this magic link method. It does ask you for a reply email address. So this will be used if any of the email addresses from last season are now incorrect. It will bounce it back to you so that you're able to identify and chase up people individually if you're wanting to send them a magic link. Right, so the last thing I'd be doing would be just to click send email, and it will merely send an email, the magic link, to all of those people from last season. In practice, the way, we have quite a few years of experience with this the magic link method, and the way that we see organisations using it well is that they will generally, the moment that they open registrations or open the ability for people to renew, they've set up their 2021 subs form, whatever, they will start using this, and commonly they will actually use this literally every week. They will send it out because they know that they're not spamming people that have already re-registered. So that simply every week they might be changing the message slightly to say, hey, 5 weeks to go. If you're receiving this, we don't believe you've re-registered, please click the link and get on with it. All right, so, and again, so as people merely complete that form, then when you go back in and view your 2020 database, so last season's database, then of course what you'll see is these records in here all going green, right? So as those people come back to renew. If there are people that I know have actually definitely left my organisation, so they're not going to renew, and I don't want to be spamming them, there is the ability down here on the right just to unclick their email, right? So if I was to unclick this, and this is common, for example, for a college where it knows that your year 13s have moved on, so you're not wanting to be hitting them to renew, you could go in, for example, and unclick people so that they're not going, you know that they've actually moved on, right? So you're not spamming those people. I should also just point out, back in from that database view, you also do have the ability to export to Excel. So from in here, I'm just going back to my database view. By clicking the export button, will open it in CSV format for me, in which case I get a dump of all of those records. So for whatever I'm wanting to do with them, showing their the date that they registered and any other fields. Whenever I add a field or a product to a form, all of those fields will automatically add as new columns to my export for me. This also makes treasury functions kind of useful as well. So if I had a field called subs, for example, anyone that had chosen, so in this case, I must have only recently added that product to the form, but any products, if I'd added socks to the form, then I'd have a column automatically here called socks, etc. All right, so ability to dump out to Excel. If I, where am I going next? Probably into Team Builder.
Just one, just some questions because you've been raised. That how many forms are available for free?
Yep. So if your organisation is associated with a sports code that's using Sporty, that form, whatever those official forms are, back through time, do not count towards a total. There is otherwise a total of 2 free forms that become available in addition to any official forms that might be available for your organisation. So if you were to come in and attempt to add a new form and it tells you that you're maxed out, you can either subscribe to additional forms, or you can have a look at what your existing forms are used for and decide if it was from, you've got something from a couple of years ago that you don't really need anymore. I would suggest just exporting it to Excel. You can still store it, upload it, store it against your site in the documents area if you want, but that will then free up one of those free 2 forms if you want. As I say, any official forms don't count towards that tally. If you do want more forms, because they are really useful, if we look at the way that some of the columns, etc., interact with forms, the next tranche you can subscribe to additional forms, and I think the pricing is on the Sporty website. But basically you can get up to 50 forms for $180 per year, depending on the number of members you have and the amount of activity you've got going on. So please have a look at the pricing on the Sporty website if you want to look at more forms for your own use. Of course, although we're talking about official forms, it's common for organisations to use forms for all different purposes. So it could be for life members, it could be for a working bee or a fundraising group, it could be for a form where you're keeping a database of stakeholders, funding partners, sponsors, any purpose that you may want a database of people that you want to communicate with. All right, so is the usefulness for forms.
Just a couple of other questions that have been raised in relation to the official forms. Any field that's set by your parent body on one of your official forms, you cannot change. So if a field has been set to mandatory, it is mandatory. Any information that you add, if you add your own fields onto the bottom of an official form, and if you have any payment information as well, none of that information gets passed to your parent body. That stays with you locally.
Yeah. Right. So if you're editing an official form, you'll see that there are a bunch. This is the rugby one. These are the official fields that come through from New Zealand Rugby. So you can't change these. These are required for New Zealand Rugby, for the ACC and their insurance, etc. But you still can go and add your own fields onto the bottom of the form. So it becomes useful as your club member management system or school system, while also automatically achieving the requirements of your sports code or body. I should just point out, for the official forms, of course, what it is doing is it is automatically taking care of reporting requirements through to your sports body. So any information where you add your own fields to a form remain private and confidential only to you, to your organisation. But the fields that come through from the official part of their form that you're unable to change, that data is automatically reported through to that governing body, right? So it meets their reporting requirements. If the governing body or your sports code has their own terms, they will automatically appear in the terms and conditions as well. You can still go and add your own. All right. A couple of people have raised importing of databases. If your data is associated with an official form, most likely your database of last seasons or previous seasons people will appear automatically for you. That's not the case in all instances. If you do have your own database of records and you're wanting to use the system just to manage your own membership that's not part of an official form, for example, we are able to import your database for you. There's not an import function that's facing to you that you can do it yourself. Please contact support@sportsground.com and let us know your requirements, right? And we can talk through that with you. Again, I'm very conscious of time. I'm just going to jump now through into the Team Builder function. Team Builder is a method that lets you see the same records that are visible. I'm actually going to use this, again, a junior rugby player database as a for example. If I go through Team Builder is a utility that makes it easy to create teams and drag and drop people into teams. It gives you a view of exactly all it's doing is reading your registration records. So it is exactly the same data that is from your registration database, and for the current season and the one previous, right? So anyone that needs to enter teams into your rugby union, your netball centre, or or a regional association that's using Sporty, or for league, where they're using SCED, Sporty competition management system, you would come into Team Builder and you should be able to see that all of your players for 2021 that are registered for the new season will automatically be visible to you in here. Obviously, they will be building up as your season gets underway and people continue to register, will continue to grow. Over on the right, you will see the grade set. So grades that should be familiar to you based on whatever sport, whichever sports organisation you are affiliated with. So over on the right, to add a team into a particular grade is as simple as clicking the Add Team button, and then I can give it a name. For example, Add Team, and then simply the system will automatically go add a team to that grade, and then I can save that team. What it's done is it's gone and added a team called Lions here. Having added that team, if I look across at all of my people, where Team Builder is really handy is it makes it easy for me to sort people by their grade, date of birth, team, etc. And then I can simply drag someone from the left and drop them into a team on the right, and I can see it will start to increment. I'll talk really quickly about a couple of things that are visible over here, or should be visible to you when you do this. One is that there is, most sports have a team entries closing date. So if they're using Sporty as the method for team entries into the competition, you will see a date here, which is where the team entries close per grade. That's really important because after that date, you won't be able to add a new team to that grade. So any teams that are in there, and that's important because at that point, whoever's organising your competition is looking at all of your teams at their end of the system, and they're organising the draw. So they're organising the fixtures for the season. right? So all team construction must be done. If there's a team entries closing date, you must do your team entries, get them all sorted before that closing date, because at that point, after that date, you will need to contact whoever is the competition organizer and apologise profusely for missing the date and ask them to do it from their end. The other point I'll point out is this team building closing date. That is the date by which, because generally competition organisers need to know how many teams are going to be in each grade. The next thing they want to know is who are the people available within the squads within those teams. So there will be a date set in here that's normally after the team entry closing date, which will be the date after which you become unable to go dragging and dropping people into a team. Incidentally, you saw before that that team was coloured red. So the reason that icon was coloured red is that there would have been settings against that team that would have given a minimum or maximum number of roles required in the particular team, right? So the team will not turn green until you've met whatever are the minimum requirements that are set for a team. A few of the things that I can do while I'm in here. For rugby and also for, I believe for rugby league, you will be able to click on a squad sheet button up here, in which case it will go and give you a printable squad sheet of your team. Just let that build for a second. In which case so this as a printable squad sheet, show you the people that exist within that team. Other things I can be doing in here, again, I can export my teams. I could export out my recipients, and I can export out team contacts. If you're a college that uses Kmart, you can have Kmart turned on, in which case a tab will appear up here for you automatically and show called school role, and it will automatically bring in, so you're able to see your entire school role. So you can then drag and drop a school role into a student into a particular team, for example. Right, so this becomes your team construction method. There are individual roles in against players. So I could, for example, go in and say, I'm going to set someone to be not just a player, they could be a coach or whatever. In this case, we've given the ability just to simply set up admin scorers. I'm not going to talk about scoring. So for those of you that are using the Sporty scoring app, please look at the website for whoever is managing your competition, so either through your union or through league or myrugbyleague.co.nz or back through the Sporty website through those links to find the specific instructions for you as to how to submit your team sheets for game day and how to score a game on game day if using the game day scoring app if you wish. Okay, so this is probably in terms of again, the fact we're seeing rugby coaches in here is simply for the sport of rugby. It happens to be wired up, so anyone who registers as a type of rugby coach will also automatically be visible in here. So it means that I could go and put a coach into a team, for example, in which case if I was to open that team, I can see that I've got players and a coach. Again, this is a speed session on Team Builder. There are much more detailed instructions through the support. But just note that the players that are visible to you in Team Builder are the same as your registration database. And this is the method that if your code is using for team entries, to go into Team Builder to add your teams per grade, and then to drag and drop to set your squads of players per grade.
A couple of sports pay questions in relation to how sports pay works and fees.
Yep, so I understand this, in terms of a couple of sports pay questions, there's a link back from the Sporty homepage out to online payments. So if I go back through here, online payments down here, if you click through that, it'll take you through to sports pay and school pay, and it basically takes you through how the online payments work, what the costs of online payments work, in terms of the processing fee. So we've tried to make it an all-inclusive transaction fee so that there are no minimum monthly amounts, particularly relevant for sport and schools, where you tend to have a whole lot of transactions happen at one time a year, and the rest of the year you don't really want to be paying a minimum monthly merchant fee, flag fall fees, etc. So please go and have a look through that area. Joe, I was going to really quickly have a super quick look back into Super CRM. People, I realised that we're getting near time. We've still got a couple of hundred people that are merely bearing with us, so thank you for that. I'm going to close out of Team Builder and just show you an area that back from the dashboard that was released. This is very new. So Super CRM is another method for managing membership. Super CRM is a premium, so it is a value-added service. So I'm not going to dwell on here too long, but it is a very advanced solution for managing communication out to your membership. Again, it lets you see all of your people that have ever had an association with your organisation over all time. The cool thing with Super CRM is that I can filter my members based on whatever criteria I want. So I could say, I want to just see purely my 2020 people that happen to be, for example, male, and then go off and apply that as a filter. And what it will do is it's going to return that different data set back to me based on whatever criteria. So I could filter based on grade, ethnicity, whatever I like. That filtered data set, I'm then able to do other stuff with. I could export them if I want, dump them out to Excel. I could apply tags to them if that's relevant to me for some other reason. But probably most importantly is I can send them a group email, or a bulk email. I could send them a group e-newsletter, or I could even create a snail mail letter. So I showed in the previous session how easy it is to have an e-newsletter. This is showing me how now I can send an e-newsletter out to these 21 recipients that were my 2020 males, as a for example. I've just chosen my default one from last, from the last session, in which case it's going to, I can kind of see what's going to go out to people's inboxes. But the other cool thing about this, and I'm going to cancel out of here, is that whenever any interaction I do with anyone in here, it will automatically add that through onto the person's timeline view. So it means that anyone that I was sending an e-newsletter through to, anyone that registers with my organisation, anyone that renews, will automatically appear in the timeline here. So if you think about that, including their financial history and other bits and pieces. So if you think about what's possible through Super CRM, just becomes a place that you can see the entire life, a 360 view over the entire life of a relationship with an individual. Same thing with this organisations tab, is that you're likely to have relationships with a whole bunch of different organisations. It could be funding partners, could be sponsors, other stakeholders, could be suppliers or other organisations, in which case I could have them in here. Again, there's a timeline against them, contacts against them, etc. So it simply becomes another way to manage that same data. If I was to look through, I also get some advanced sort of dashboard reporting available to me in terms of other things that I can do in here. So Super CRM is available through to, as part, if you are a rugby league zone or district, you will automatically have access to Super CRM. For clubs and schools, Super CRM is not automatically added for you. It is a add-on service. Pricing again is on the Sporty homepage, so you're able to decide, and it's based on the number of administrators and the number of records that you're handling, etc. Right, so it's pretty straightforward. League-specific questions in relation to transfer workflow. So there's a league session that's happening tomorrow evening for zones and districts. We'd like that to happen first. There is already some information on myrugbyleague.co.nz, which, as I mentioned before, you can get to simply by going to the Sporty homepage, picking the sport, your own sports code here. So these are organisations that are doing something directly with Sporty. So in terms of for rugby league, there are specific instructions for club administrators here, but there will be more information that we will be helping your districts and zones make sure that there are resources and comms that come out to league clubs. Realise that league is a little bit different than other sports codes, where the seasons that you guys run varies depending on your district. So I'm aware that some league districts don't actually kick off their season until after rugby union season finishes, whereas we've had some league districts that have already kicked off their season ahead of traditional winter codes. So please do, after tomorrow evening, we're hoping that there will be resources that will be helping your districts make available to you. But this site, myrugbyleague.co.nz, is a place for you to find this information and how to get on and see your registered league players from last season, invite them to renew for the new season, and to handle that transfer workflow process. Other questions, Jo?
Displaying the form on the website as well, having duplicate email addresses, where the email address goes through, and a number of kind of quite specific queries that we will need to answer out of the forum offline, just in relation to specific
so can probably cover.
Game day apps have been raised as well, about any informational sessions on those.
Yep. So on the game day app side of things, for any organisation that's going to be using the game day app, and this will include rugby league, there will be there are a couple of short tutorial videos coming for you guys that will show you it's a very simple app to use. There's only a couple of things you're really doing. Any of the teams, any of the players that you put into teams using Team Builder automatically become visible to you in the app when you log in. So it makes it very easy for you to tap on the people that are going to actually take the field for game day, and same for netball, taking the court, etc. And same for rugby organisations. So you're probably aware that New Zealand Rugby is shifting all of rugby union nationally to the Sporty Game Day app for 2021. There's no change for the likes of Canterbury Rugby Union and Hawke's Bay Rugby Union that have already been using that app. For the other unions or clubs associated with rugby, you will see the Sporty Game Day app the same as league, effectively. So for league, it just means that you're able to go in, see your players that are part of your squad, identify who's actually going to be playing on game day, so by simply tapping them on or off, and then you're able to actually score the game automatically. So it will bring through fixtures automatically for most of the districts are using the Sporty competition management system, which means that your draws will automatically be available for you to score games against using the Sporty Game Day app. So there will be specific information, because as you can imagine, it varies per sports code. So the way netball is organised and scored is quite different to softball, is different to league, different to rugby, etc. Right, so there will be information that's, in that case, it's unlikely to be a live webinar. It will be most likely we will be distributing links to those videos and support resources around the game day app scoring side of things. There was, in terms of how to display a link to your form from the website, I am going to reiterate, just cover that really quickly since I heard that was a question. Again, just as a reminder, back into your online registrations area, every single form in here, regardless of whether you created it yourself or if it's an official form, will automatically appear in here against whatever folder it resides in, and every single form has a link to that form. Okay, so you can create your own return URL if you're using a different site, but I could simply copy that link, and then by virtue of having copied that link, if I then go off to edit my website, and I'll do this on a Sporty website as a for example, but you could be doing this in Facebook, could be doing it anywhere. I could now simply go and in text, for example, I could say register here. And I'm just pasting that link. It's automatically recognized it as a hyperlink, and it's saying click here, in which case, if I simply go and view the public view of that text, it's now introduced this ability for me to click here, in which case it's going to take me to that form, right? So there are other methods through your website in terms of editing content. I could, for example, go and put a button into a position, and from that button I could link my button out to an online form, in which case I could go and choose that particular form and click so that it's, I've got a name, As a for example, in which case now I've created a button on my page. If I view the way the public sees that, it's a button that links out for someone to register. Remember that what we're displaying is a blank form, so that it's not going to have, it doesn't know their details. That's for people that are could be new. It's fine for people to register on a blank form, even if they were a member of your organisation in their last year. The system will automatically name match them and tie the record back into the previous record. So it should still turn green in the database view for the previous season. But it's so the two methods that people most commonly register by is either completing a blank form or by you having sent their bulk email where they've got the magic link and come in to automatically renew without needing to log in. Any other specific questions?
No, more specific questions to certain things that have actually happened.
Guys, I realise that we've reached time for this session, so there is going to be more material that will be added to the Sporty website, and particularly for your individual codes. If you do have specific questions that we haven't covered this evening,
or haven't been answered, because they haven't all been able to be answered.
Yeah. So, again, I just remind you that back from the Sporty homepage, do come through to this online support area here as well. So online support is really, really comprehensive, and the area for online support in relation to online registrations is through this area here. There are a whole bunch of video tutorials in here as well. So it goes through, including someone asked about management of rugby league transfers. I see there's an article that's been added here on this already. Create a form, other bits and pieces. If you can't figure out the answer by following your nose through here, please do either click this little help button down on the bottom right when you're in here. It will first of all let you try and search for it first of all. So it will give you suggested answers. If you can't find the answer, click contact us. And what this does is it raises a support ticket back at our end. So it means that it's something that we can't ignore. Our fantastic support team, which is largely super Treston, will be all over this and helping you out, but through our other support staff. So alternatively, do email support@sportsground.com. We do also have on our website contact details. If you're subscribing to Sporty services, you get an 0800 number. If you're not actually subscribing, if you're only using free services, there's an 0900 number for you that is a premium paid number. The purpose of it being 0900 is not a money-making exercise. It's to hopefully discourage people from calling. We really would hope that you'll find the answer in here, but we understand that sometimes you want an urgent answer and we have to have people available for that. So please, you'll find those contact details again on the Sporty website. I'll stop our sharing and just say thank you very, very much for spending your time with us this evening. And I hope that the season goes well for you. Please do contact us directly if we can help you further. I'll end the meeting. Thanks and good night.